Well, welcome back to P&R Churchmen. It's been a few weeks. I'm not sure when the last episode I recorded was, but it's been a busy season. And today I'm excited to have a conversation with a friend of mine, Ike Reeder. And we're going to be talking a lot of things. We'll be talking about his father, Harry Reeder, a new initiative called the Reeder Center. We'll talk about changes and exciting things at Birmingham Theological Seminary, and then a little bit about GA and how you can connect with Ike there. Ike, thanks for being on, buddy.
It's always a pleasure, my friend. Love what you're doing and love supporting it.
I appreciate that. Hey, just before we get into all that, so it was a real blessing to have you at Meadowview, the church where I serve, our 75th anniversary just a couple weeks ago. So, thanks for coming to that, Ike.
No, it was a delight, and what a fantastic celebration of God's faithfulness to the church, and great to see old friends like Gary Cox there as well, and who has been. Our families have been connected with the Reeder and the Cox family for since the early 1970s when Dad and Gary met and served together in Chattanooga. But it was just really neat to see. Every church has got ups and downs and everything else, but what a great expression of God's faithfulness to His body, to His bride, and just to see the ministers that were present and joy, and it was just a lot of fun. It was a real pleasure to be there.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that was just really surprising to me. So you and I, we ran into each other at Twin Lakes Fellowship, and you took me out for a great dinner along with a lot of other people. But I just kind of threw it out there for you. Hey, you're going to be in the Charlotte area on that weekend, and you asked why, and I said what was going on. And you said, well, I'm going to come, and bro, that meant a lot. It because, and so I gave you the opportunity, or actually forced you to say some words, and it really brought our story at Meadowview together in an amazing way because, I didn't meet you because of your former relationship with our church. I met you through GRN events and then your work at Birmingham Theological Seminary, but it really does bring together a lot of your father's story because your father was instrumental in the revitalization of this church called Meadowview here. And people told stories when we had some testimony time about their remembrances about some guy that came in the 80s that helped them, think outside themselves and recommend Gary Cox to be our pastor. And you were like, yeah, that was your dad.
Yeah. It was, I think obviously, the first reason that I wanted to be there was just because of our friendship and to support you and your ministry. And of course, we've got some of your session guys and others that are doing some BTS classes. So it was fun to just get up and they're in the Presbyterian Leadership Certificate and whatnot. So that was always just a fun time and, to support you. But as you mentioned, there's a long history there with Meadowview in North Carolina and my dad's ministry with Christ Covenant. As you know, Dad was called by Briarwood to go to Christ Covenant. It was a replant / revitalization, and with the charge to basically plant and revitalize churches to start a new presbytery, to spin off Central Carolina Presbytery, create more presbyteries. They weren't just talking. It's great when you think about how we thought that way as a denomination, right? Like. The charge was not go plant a church that will plant a church. It was go plant a church that will plant an entire presbytery. That was the idea behind Christ Covenant. And part of that was finding the churches coming out of the PCUSA, churches that were RPCES that had come in 83, in 82, et cetera, those kinds of environments. And Dad really took that challenge on and developed a great relationship with Meadowview. And everybody is aware, obviously, of my father's commitment to church revitalization. And Meadowview was really the first church where those principles that Dad had started to codify, remember, repent, recover, focus on building godly shepherding leadership, etc. Those principles, Meadowview was the first church where he really was able to say, hey, in our capacity to help at Christ Covenant, we've got a guy who's been trained in this. Let's send him up there. And Gary came, and the Lord just really blessed that ministry. And so, just what a treat to then see that connection Gary coming back for the 75th anniversary, and then get to worship all together on Sunday and hear your preaching, the gospel being strongly, clearly preached from the pulpit with compassion, and just a fantastic way to pull all those threads together.
Yes, thank you. But what was neat for me is I've heard your father in different contexts talk about that, being sent to plant a church, to plant a presbytery, and not knowing much of the context of the PCA at that time in North Carolina, because there's churches all over North Carolina now, and then to be at a church that is the fruit of exactly what he has often said, like the evidence of it, because it's not like Meadowview was in his backyard. It's over an hour from, was it Christ Covenant in Matthews?
Christ Covenant Matthews.
It's over an hour away in a rural town that, probably is not the target church for a lot of church planting or revitalization efforts in today's world of church planting. It's not in a city or anything. We're built on farmland,
That's right.
And, we were small. It was, I think at the time when he came, it was probably a 70-person or 60-person church.
60, 70 people.
Yeah. And he took the time to drive up. I don't know how he found out about Meadowview, but it's cool because when it was being shared at our event, the woman who shared it said, I don't remember the man who came. And you're like, exactly who, because you're part of our history too. We were the first church, you said, to support you as a missionary besides Christ Covenant, besides your home church.
Yeah, when I graduated from Covenant, I went to Vienna, Austria for a few years and taught at an international school and was officially a missionary with MTW. And of course, I'm talking to Dad. I'm a 22-year-old. I don't have any idea about doing this. And I'd raised, you raise money for a summer week-long trip to someplace, but not 3 years going overseas. And so that first person he said to call was Gary. He said, call Gary. He'll get you in touch with their missions committee, and we'll see what happens. Son, you got to make the case, but we'll see what happens. And Meadowview very kindly came on board. But I want to go back to something you just mentioned, George, because I think it's very telling. Who was Meadowview at the time, and what was this church? And it was an hour and probably hour and 25 back then. And not as many interstates. I mean, it definitely was not an 8-lane interstate going up out of Charlotte like it is now. You're talking back roads, you're talking all kinds of stuff. And my memory from childhood, I mean, one of the things I have just, I can't say we loved it when we were kids, but it is now for all three of us, me and both my sisters, some of our, and has been for years, some of our fondest, favorite memories from childhood was that all of these rural churches around Charlotte, because North Carolina, obviously with its Scotch-Irish influence, had tons of Presbyterian churches, but a lot of those churches stayed in, the PCUS. They didn't come out. And so there was not a lot, there was other PCA churches in that central Carolina area and region, but like you said, many of them were rural churches. Many of them, they had been RPCES that came out to come into the PCA. That wasn't until the early 80s, obviously. And Dad just so faithfully committed, not just to his work at Christ Covenant, but to his work for the presbytery. He would drive around. I just remember so many times when I was, 14, 15 and under. Obviously, about that point in time, we start playing sports and you're busy and everything else. But really that 14 and 15 and under, Dad coming home, we're home from school saying, got your homework done? Yeah, Dad, got your homework done. All right, come on, jump in the car. I'm driving up to so-and-so. I'm driving out to, Concord, or I'm going out to Monroe, or I'm going out to Lexington, or I'm going up to Greensboro, or I'm going to, whatever. And what are you doing? Well, it's they've got a Wednesday night service, and I'm going to go up and preach for it. And they've asked me to come preach, and that it was their chance to get a guest pastor from the big city up and in. And they asked, he was there. He went, and then he would grab one of us and he always took one of us kids with him if it was possible. Mm-hmm. And we would ride with him, and we'd talk, and we'd have conversation. We'd talk in the car. Normally there'd be a dinner. We'd sit and talk. We'd get to watch Dad do ministry. And we would learn from it. This is my son, Ike. How are you, Ike? This is the pastor, et cetera, et cetera. And then we come home and he'd talk to us about it. And he talked to us about us and everything else too. But like I tell people, this is one of the great parenting principles that our parents demonstrated, was that yes, they did come down into our world. They came to our games, they did all that stuff, but they also made this very significant effort to grab us by the hand and bring us up into their world.
That's
so we
great.
could see that what they did as parents and what their commitments were. And that's how we learned what it meant for my dad to be a pastor. You know, it wasn't always just the Christ covenant stuff. It was watching all of this other stuff that he did to support the work of the presbytery. And what a lesson. What a lesson. And I hope our young pastors hear that. Even our ruling elders that listen to this podcast hear it and say, you know, hey, I'm a ruling elder. I got a son or a daughter. How do I bring them up with me so they can see what I'm doing as an under shepherd in the church? You know, such an important lesson.
Oh, that is so awesome. You know, even as you're talking, I'm thinking like those are some of those things I try to do with my own son, and I have a ruling elder here who has a son about the same age, and he takes both our sons and they build things for the church, and it's yeah, absolutely good. That's good stuff. Like I didn't know we were even going to go there in this, but we've spent quite a bit of this already talking about your father, and you know I've asked you if we're okay to go in this direction because in 2 days it'll be the 1 year anniversary of your father going home.
Yeah.
And leaving us in the process and leaving you guys. And so just how are you guys doing? And yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. As long as, you know, you don't mind having a blubbering mass, you know, on your podcast potentially. So, you know, as long as you're good with that, I'm good to talk about it. And, but you know, today's the as we've had the conversations around here at Briarwood, of course, today is the day anniversary, and Saturday is the date anniversary because, you know, as I'm sure anyone listening, you know, understands that the day that someone dies often is what you remember more than the actual date that someone dies. And so Thursday morning had our Cracker Barrel breakfast with my two guys that we're kind of do a little accountability group together. Had a lunch with a potential board member, and then that's when I got the phone call, you know, and that was Thursday, and you know it's Thursday, and but Saturday is the 1 year anniversary, and you know we're the Lord has been so kind and gracious to our family this year, and to my mom and my two sisters and my Aunt Beth, you know, sort of the immediate family, obviously the extended, the kids, the grandkids, the you know, nephews and nieces and everything else in Birmingham and Charlotte, and in Augusta, Georgia. But the Lord has been very kind. We're very grateful for Dr. Doriani and the work that he's done as an interim here since, you know, November, December here at Briarwood. He sent all of us a very kind letter this week, and just mentioning, you know, how he's experienced, you know, Dad's footprints in his work as the interim, and how grateful he has been for those. We're going to have a great time. We've got some dinner with the senior leadership team tonight, graduation tomorrow night for BTS with our largest graduating class in, I don't know, probably 20 years. And then we've got family. We're just going to get together as a family and have a cookout on Saturday night and do what we did when Dad was alive. We'll cook out, have a great time, talk, tell stories. And then we'll read the text for Sunday morning, pray, have family devotions, and go to worship. And that's what he would have wanted.
Yeah. Wow. I know it came as a shock to us all. I mean, we had just seen him at the GRN conference in Charlotte, and we were all looking forward to General Assembly, and the Lord had other plans. What occurred to me, I mean, did you see God's grace in the lead up to it at all? And what I mean is, like, the year before he did a talk about 50 years in ministry. I know you guys were working on a documentary with him before this, some interview. And it's just like, man, the Lord seems to have given all these opportunities for him to sort of reflect and download on ministry. And we never are happy about when God takes somebody home in their prime, but it just seems like God was gracious in the lead up to it.
Yeah. Well, there's God's graces and mercies are obviously infinite and sometimes undetectable and sometimes detectable in his providences. But yes, there were graces that we were able to identify, in that sense. His plan basically had been to step down this year to 2024 was kind of the year that he was planning on making a transition. We had talked to him at BTS. He was going to be coming on as a senior teaching fellow in pastoral studies for us. And I told him, look, you teach whatever you want. We'll make sure it aligns with the divinity curriculum. I'll title it, codify it, do whatever. But if we can get 10 or 15 guys that are training for ministry in a room with you once a week, we'll be happy. That's good, and to learn from your ministry. And so, we had been talking about those kinds of things. There was, like you said, I think his, he's not he was not as we say, a father of the PCA, like Dr. Barker, like Dr. Baird, like Dr. Kennedy, like the men that were there at the beginning. He didn't actually join the PCA till 1980. And then when we moved to Miami and he came to Pinelands, but even though he had gone to Covenant College, which at the time wasn't PCA either, of course, as it was RPCS. And, he was one of those second generation fathers, like him and Dr. Keller and, and others that we're all very familiar with. And so, that 50-year mark of the PCA, though, by definition, gave opportunity for reflection. And so that in and of itself was engendering reflective behaviors from a lot of guys that were in their 65 and older kind of time range. So that alone was impetus for that process, again, in God's grace that it came at that time. And then he was planning on what's his next, which was not retirement. It was to teach full time. And we had said, we're going to give you teach whatever you want. We'll record all of it. We'll give you 4 or 5 research assistants so we can get transcriptions and get book projects going. And, that was the plan. So it was interesting, but at the end of the day, I even think that, my dad, obviously I think my dad was one of the strongest men I've ever known with a work engine that was just unlike anybody except for maybe Frank Barker. I think he and Frank had the same work engine. They just didn't stop. They just did not stop going for the gospel. And, but like Frank, and although at different times, one of the things we'll talk about is some of the projects we have in the works. But one of them is that we just got the conclusion to, which people have seen from the GRN announcement, but we just got our copies of the Fettschrift that we put together for Dad, essays in memory of Harry Reeder, A Pastor's Heart, with essays from Kevin DeYoung and Fred Greco and Sandy Wilson and George Grant and many other men, including my sister Jennifer, who wrote a chapter on family in there. And these projects that we have, one of the things that I say in the introduction to this, in my introduction to it, is these guys were poured out. They were drink offerings. They weren't burnt offerings. There's no ash left. It's empty. When the Lord took them home, they left behind an empty cup, and everything. They just gave everything for the Lord and for the work of the gospel. But they did it the right way. They didn't do it to the exclusion of their families or to the exclusion of their personal responsibilities. They did it and realized that part of that was caring for their families and caring for husbands, caring for wives, and fathers being fathers to children, as we already talked about a little bit ago. But there was nothing that they did that was not gospel saturated, gospel informed, biblically drenched, and they were going to just do it till they died. And then the Lord,
when you're saying they, you're talking about Frank and your
Frank,
father.
Yeah, I'm just using talking about Frank and Harry together.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Man, that is awesome. So let's transition to what you've already alluded to, And what is this initiative that we've heard rumblings of, the Reeder Center? Are you able to tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very excited. I mean, I guess if people are listening to it, somebody might say this is a formal announcement. We're excited to have a little.
Wait a minute, is this the first formal announcement?
This may be the first formal announcement.
You heard it here, folks. First,
depends on when this goes live. That is, George.
I'm going to get it out right after we're done recording.
So it's not a secret by any stretch, and I'll be presenting on it to the session of Briarwood this coming Tuesday night, just to make sure that that we highlight and honor Briarwood Presbyterian and as the the church that BTS holds its accountability relationship with. And of course, because of Dad's, legacy of ministry here. But, it's a good transition, George, because obviously I've been talking about my father, and what I've learned from him and things that I think we can learn from him and other of the saints that have gone before. But there's a close distinction between having a great conversation about pastors that have run the race and finished faithfully, and what we can learn from their lives and their ministry, good and bad. None of them are perfect, of course, but versus creating memorializations and lionizing people from the past. And so I think one of the most important distinctions that we want to make sure, and we've tried to work this into the new website and formal communication, all of which will be going live here shortly, which is that this is not a project that's just a son wanting to memorialize his dad, and that's because the son knows that his dad would come down and would beat him silly if he did that in an adult capacity. Not advocating he wouldn't actually beat me, just in case don't anyone take that the wrong way. Metaphor. He would say, son, this is not about me. This is about the gospel. But at BTS, we are particularly blessed. And this is not saying blessed more than other seminaries. This is not a comparative. Just an observation. We are incredibly blessed at BTS. We've really had three sort of central figures, PCA focused. We've had some other guys that have been really involved and that are in some of our Baptist partnerships. But in the PCA context, of course, our two founders, Dr. Frank Barker and Dr. Bill Hay. And Dr. Hay went to be with the Lord just this past February himself. So within about a year and a half window, we lost, Dr. Barker, Dr. Reeder, and Dr. Hay. Dad, as soon as he got here in 1999, picked up the ball for BTS. He and Frank both taught at BTS just over that period. And obviously Frank taught for much longer than my dad. We've calculated up. They both taught over 3,000 individually, over 3,000 in-person class hours with students at BTS over the 20 plus year time period. And we have all three of those men that were deeply involved in the life of the seminary and training pastors and providing education opportunities for the local church. All three finished well. They finished strong. And all three, if you go look at all three families, praise the Lord, and we're praying for God's continuing sustaining mercy. All three, all of their children are walking with the Lord. And as we know, that is not necessarily the expectation in a pastor's family. We hear horror stories all the time. So we kind of looked at that and said, you know what? God did something there. And he did something in the lives of those men. And we know that it was the Lord's sustaining hand of providence, but we also know that we're called to walk out that providence in our sanctification and in our working out of our salvation. There's got to be something we can learn from here. And so, the seminary itself is a testimony to Frank and Bill. They were the founders of the seminary. And we have the Barker Hay Scholarship Fund that helps support students coming to BTS. So what we did was we took the Pastoral Theology department, which was what Dad was going to be coming into and basically running for us. And instead of having Harry come run it, what we've done instead is we've taken that step to upgrade it from just an academic study department of pastoral theology, and we've upgraded it. We've given it jacked it up to be a center where, not to memorialize Harry, but recognizing the biblical channel markers that we can identify from Dad, Frank, and Bill of ministry. These are things we, of course, were already doing, but how can we drill down even deeper on these and utilize the resources that we have? They are legacy resources, but not for legacy purposes, to utilize the legacy resources for generations to come. And the solution we came up with was to turn our pastoral theology department into the Harry Reeder Center for Pastoral Studies at BTS. And that center will have three primary responsibilities that it will be doing. Number one, obviously, this is outside of its academic work that it's doing in training pastors. But we're going to be compiling 45 years of Dad's ministry property, his intellectual property, sermons, podcasts, blogs, etc., and creating a singular searchable database by topic, theological topic, and scriptural index, very similar to like the Martin Lloyd Jones Trust, sort of thing. And that's just a for prosperity project. We think it should be there, researchable, usable for pastors for generations to come. But the seminary students will be working on that project. So we'll have 10 annual scholarships, full scholarships, particularly targeted to second career calling guys that are 30 plus years old, that have already been active members in the church, but the Lord has clearly placed a call on them to move towards ministry, and they will be able to receive a full scholarship to go to BTS, book stipend, and we're praying that the Lord will also use it with some more. We're going to be targeting 75% of those 10 to be residential here in Birmingham. And then that's the database project. From that, we've identified around 40 book topics that are that we believe are within the realm of publishability, if you will, working with co-authors. And the Reader Center will support those co-authors in those projects. They will receive research assistance to help with the book project. And then we're talking with RHB and Ligonier and Crossway and P&R and Christian Focus and others. And they've all got lists, and they've said we're interested in these and these. But that's not to publish, just get a ghost writer to publish Dad's work. It's to get a co-author to bring that work up to publication standard, and then bring their expertise to the matter as well, and then publish it thinking future forward. What is this for the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation? This is not projects just so we can have a family bookshelf with the Harry Reeder book project. It's because we believe that there is timeless biblical truths for the church and the body of Christ, individual believers in Jesus, and for pastoral ministry and training, where we can bring a real gospel-saturated, reformed pastoral theology for the next 50 years. I mean, if we can raise the money to support this, George, I truly believe that this project could change the face, set the tone, lead in a positive direction, whatever phrase you want to use, of pastoral theological publication for the next 50 to 100 years. Because after we do the book projects, we would be interested in being a grant-giving organization. If like-minded, reformed, confessional pastors want to write works that are aligned with the principles of the Reader Center, then sure, here's a grant. This might help you with a 2-month sabbatical to get your work done and get it out there to benefit the body of Christ in pastoral training. And then there's other projects that would come with that, a conference that we'd like to run here in Birmingham, the Reader Conference on Pastoral Leadership. And of course, all of this stuff, as it's completed, is reintegrated into a curriculum where we're recruiting, and we've already got an unbelievable pastoral faculty here at BTS, but we've added recently, guys like George Grant. We've got others that are doing work in church leadership, and Tom Hawks, and just some wonderful guys that are teaching in our pastoral theology department that we want the next generation of pastors to benefit from. And so that's the basic idea of the Reader Center.
So let me jump in and do my own summary. So I listed 6 things that I picked up on. One is the BTS is their pastoral leadership, pastoral theology track will be the Reader Center will come under that, or that will come under the Reader Center essentially.
Yeah, that'll become the Reader Center for Pastoral Studies.
Right. You're going to be giving out 10 scholarships.
Yep, every year.
Every year. So that means,
within 5 years, we could have 50 full scholarship guys studying and training for ministry.
Right, and it just keeps going.
Yeah.
A database where all of your father's resources, books, sermons, audio files, blog posts, whatever can be accessed, which I'm going to be very excited about that.
And fully searchable. We're going to be tagging sermons with theological topics, tagging the scripture passages where he's doing his exposition and exegesis. So you'll be able to type in.
Will that include the daily podcast he was doing?
Yeah, it's going to daily podcast. And the fresh bread is one of the book projects. We're going to be turning those into a book devotional series that people can use on the specific books that he goes through as well. Yeah.
So, and then you've targeted at least 40 books, and you'll have co-authors with those, and it'll be really collaborative, which is going to be really neat. There's the grant giving, future look, and also conferences. And so just a great way. I love, by the way, how you said at the beginning of this, the point is not to memorialize Harry Reeder, but to just take the great resource that he's been in so many pastors' lives and continue that work. And what a day we live in that this is even possible. I love the plan behind it. And what I'm going to say, I'm the least qualified person to say, but your father had a way of making people he recently met feel as they singularly were important and mattered in his life. And I still have a phone call from a year ago. I won't delete it. A 2-minute long message that and my experience with your dad was only a couple years. It was not long, but somehow he had substantive feedback and encouragement for me, and I wasn't really in his sphere. And so I totally get that he pastored, the flagship church of the PCA and had a whole congregation, and yet somehow was so dedicated toward mentorship and discipleship of men to take office and to be pastors of churches. To be officers.
The offices of elders. The teaching elder, the ruling elder, and the deacon. He was just deeply committed to that training and discipleship. Absolutely, George. I think you're exactly right.
Yeah. So I've been excited about this since you've shared it with me. I don't know how you keep the plates spinning, and there's so many good things going on at BTS. So maybe we can transition there, and I'm sure we'll have some back and forth. But BTS, I became interested in it at the first GRN conference I went to. That's when I reached out to you. And I love the model, love what you're doing. But in that time, in the 3 or 4 years that, I guess it's probably 4 years now, because I've been studying there for 3.
Yeah. And we spent a year talking for me to try to convince you to come here.
Yes. Things are happening. Yeah. Things are happening at BTS, and I can only attribute that to the Lord. Yeah. And the Lord is using you in that. There's no doubt, because when did you become president there?
April 1st of 2018. So
yeah, not very long. 6 years.
This is my 7th year.
7th year. Okay.
The best long form April Fool's prank that anyone's ever played.
You're the April Fool. No,
I'm the
bro,
April Fool's president.
Yeah, man. I like to think I have a high capacity for just keeping the plates spinning, and the Lord's wired me in those ways. But you put everybody to shame. So, what is the Lord doing at BTS? What is the last year, or however long you want to say, because I know you have a lot of new hires, a lot of new programs, a lot of news. And why this relates to this podcast, and you're the only, I think between you and O. Palmer Robertson, you're the only non-ruling elders I allow on here. And so you're in good company. But it's because you serve the church. And
that's our goal.
And the whole purpose of this podcast is to resource officers in the PCA, teaching elders and ruling elders, but I generally highlight ruling elders. But and so go ahead. I've said enough.
No.
BTS, what's going on?
Yeah, no, and let me just take one step back before I say that and say, the guiding principles of the Reeder Center are the guiding principles of the seminary. I mean, like, this is, I mentioned them several times, so I do want to say them real quick because they'll segue into what we're talking about. But, number one, biblical expository preaching. I mean, the preaching of the word, discipleship in the church starts with the pulpit, and what that looks like and the commitment to that for pastoral training. Number two, church vitality. What is the church? What is the biblical doctrine of the church? What is a faithful and healthy church? What does it look like? Anyone who knows my dad knows how deeply he was committed to that. It's one of the first book projects we're working on. Number three, to your point, George, shepherding the flock. Like, that recognition, I'm not in this to be a celebrity. I'm called to be a shepherd. I've got a threefold office, prophet, priest, and king, but I got this priestly shepherding office that I've got to execute as a pastor. It's one of my primary responsibilities. And those are the stories you hear over and over again, is Dad's commitment to be a shepherd to the congregation. What's amazing is how far outside the congregation that commitment to shepherding went as well. Number four is leadership replication. I mean, Dad was deeply committed to leadership. He firmly believed that in the human capacity, without an extraordinary work of God, no church goes beyond its leadership. The leadership sets the tone, it sets the pace, it sets the vision, and he believed that investing in the replication of leaders was essential, which goes to your also to your point about his passion for men that were working through calling to the offices of teaching, ruling, elder, or the diaconate, and others that were called to leadership roles. Bible study leaders, Sunday school teachers, women in the appropriate leadership positions, etc. And then finally, the pastor's personal spiritual life, the pastor's personal spiritual formation, and the pastor's family spiritual formation. Those are the 5 principles. And again, we were already doing all that because we had Frank and Harry teaching all the time. And so we're not saying those are their principles. Those are ones we've deduced from their work and teaching that we think will guide not just ministry training, but leadership for the church across the board. Exactly what you're talking about, how BTS can serve the church in its local situated context. One of my fundamental axioms as an educator, because I come from an education background before a theological academic background, although I have studies in academic theology. My firm belief is that pastors are not trained in seminaries. Pastors are trained and should be trained in churches. It is the church's job to train ministers. The senior pastors, really, yeah. Hey, Jack, that's a fact. That's right. Senior pastors, sessions, presbyteries invested in the next generation of pastors and their training. Seminaries, we're the academy. We can come alongside and provide one of the most essential resources, which is academic discipleship, academic theological discipleship that can be put in the hands. But we all know that the classroom is not where you learn how to shepherd somebody. You learn how to shepherd somebody by going with somebody who is shepherding. That's a mimetic practice. Are there books you can read? Are there things you can? Yeah, but ultimately, the lived pastoral life is learned through imitation. It's learned through mimesis. It's learned through watching and saying, I'm going to do it like that. I'm going to do it like that. Then watching enough so that you can find your own pathway that is influenced by, but is firmly grounded in Scripture. So we have a specific task. So our goal is to push this academic discipleship into the hands of the local churches, which means we're going to go do it wherever we have the opportunity to do it. We're going to find a way to get live professors, whether it's through technology or whether it's through paying to bring them to places. Any place we've got 5 or 6 students in a room, we can send a professor to teach. We just did Intro to Covenant Theology in Columbia, South Carolina. We've got Intro to Pastoral and Biblical Counseling getting ready to run in Knoxville, Tennessee. We've got a ton of classes here in Birmingham, of course, but stuff going literally all over the country where we're sending our professors into the local church to help them utilize these resources for training pastors. But then it goes to that second level. If that is happening, I mean, imagine, George, if we've got, obviously somebody like you could teach it, or if we send a professor
somebody like me.
Like yourself, finishing up you're finishing your doctoral degree, you're getting there.
Okay, yeah. All right, well, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like within our qualified realm, we have found these venues and models where we could send somebody to Meadowview Pres to teach Intro to Covenant Theology, and then we tell the churches, would you like to use this as a mini conference for your church? Bring your elders, bring your deacons, they want to come Thursday afternoon, all day Friday, all day Saturday. How can this be a resource for your body?
Yeah, and so it seems like that model you're definitely expanding. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
Because obviously the program I'm a part of is cohort based, online. You have in-person classes. You have all of those things, and so I think what I'm hearing too is like the model of BTS is scalable because, like you said, if you have the people for a class in a location, you're willing to go and do it. There's just a flexibility about BTS, and let's face it, amazing instructors. Like the idea that you guys got Fred Greco to teach PCA polity right after the General Assembly he was the moderator of. It was like 2 months later. Like that was a score, and I know my ruling elders benefited from that. So what are the things going on? Like what? So how many people are graduating? I think you already said it was a record number of graduates this year.
36 graduates, with about 10 of them are certificate based, and the rest are graduate and doctoral degrees. 36 graduates coming up tomorrow night. It'll be live streamed. You're more than welcome to watch. If you want to, just go to the Briarwood live stream. That's where we do it, because we do it at the Briarwood Sanctuary, of course. We have already cleared 400 students that have taken classes this year with us. We've got summer registrations ongoing. You're going to get out of it what you decide to put into it, whether you're sitting in a class or whether you're on a computer screen. It's your choice as to what you want to learn and grow.
Yeah, but I think, in the context of this audience, these are going to be people from all over the country. Most of them aren't going to go to Birmingham. So I think that, the video conference classes that you do is as close to a classroom experience as you're going to get in an online platform. And I've been doing this for 3 years. I mean, I feel like I'm in the room with these 7 people that I've been studying with. And so, as opposed to a lot of online programs, and I'm not disparaging anything, but there's a lot of online programs that are sort of watch these videos, be in these discussion forums, whatever. Like BTS's are video conferences. It's not always Zoom. It's whatever the professor wants, but you basically go in just like this conversation you're having, and you learn from, again, any one of a number of awesome. I had George Grant this last semester, and it was phenomenal. The man he's so smart, yet like he just exudes the grace of Jesus Christ in all of his wonderful, extravagant vocabulary, just trying to get you to like the number of adjectives doesn't even do our Lord justice, but his speech just brings you into the glory of God. It's awesome.
As my sister said about my dad at his funeral, obviously I was rewatching it the other day, just given the anniversary. As my younger sister said, Dad coined his own term to be a verbivore. George is you look up, you open up the dictionary and you'll see George's picture under verbivore. That's for sure.
Yeah.
which Dad and George both got that from R.C. Sproul. Like it was Dr. Sproul when both of them were young men being mentored by R.C. in the 80s. Because George worked for Ligonier back in the 80s, and when they were doing that, Dad would have them memorize vocabulary. It's one of the things he had them do, and that's how both.
I mean, Sproul would.
Yeah, Sproul, R.C. Sproul would have them memorize vocab lists. And he said you have to have the right word. You've got to your job is to communicate. You must have the right word.
Well, that's obvious. Yeah,
it's crazy. But just to go to your point, George, Dr. Grant, he did the online class for you guys, but we had him here, did Christ and Culture for us for 3 days. We had over 25 people in the room. It was wonderful. I mean, about 12 of them were students, but we had people from there was people. I would have loved to see 100 people in the room. And some of that's on us, because we are lean operations. To go to your final question that you had about what else is happening. Well, the growth that God has blessed us with has been extraordinary, and we're very grateful for it. But we're very excited for the first time, at least as far as I can tell, in the history of the seminary, we will now have a fully realized executive team. We've just hired, and we sent out the MailChimp announcement last week. We just hired Dave Latham, who has been a senior pastor at Grace Pres in Fort Payne for the last 6 years. RUF, worked at RTS Charlotte and admissions. He's coming on board to be our full-time chief admissions and communications officer. So he's going to be taking over the admissions stuff from me. And I mean, I'll still be involved, obviously, to a degree, but he's going to be heading that up and running with it. And then we just hired Mr. Justin Richardson, who's been at Covenant Pres here in Birmingham for the last 6 years in an executive administrative role. Justin is in the process of finishing his dissertation at Puritan and Reformed Seminary, which is a close partnered friend of ours. And Justin's going to be our new chief academic officer. And of course, he is academically inclined, and he's finishing his PhD, and he's a young guy, but he's got 13 years of administration and logistics experience, which is going to be extremely beneficial and helpful for us in developing, with our growth, in developing better course rotations, what's available. I mean, we want our Presbyterian Leadership Certificate available, at least 2 classes from it every semester. So that I would love to see churches send ruling elders to this program. You get a group, we'll send you a professor. I mean, if a presbytery said, hey, we've got 10 guys in the Presbyterian Leadership Program, we'll send somebody to go do a Presbyterian Church History Intensive for a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'd love to see every month we're sending a professor someplace, because the church has said, we think that this type of education is important for our people. And this is an opportunity where the pastor can say, here's a great organization that we can partner with that provides these resources in a flexible, affordable manner. And listen, as far as I can tell, we're one of the only, at least predominantly Presbyterian seminaries out there where we report all this stuff 4 times a year to the session of Briarwood Pres. I mean, theological, fiscal, operational, and ethical accountability with the session of the flagship church of the PCA. Yeah. We are praying God's faithfulness for generations to come.
Yeah. And you guys have invested money into the website, but also into your learning management system platform, whatever you all call that in the education world. And this time last year, we premiered the
Presbyterian Leadership Certificate.
The Leadership Certificate. You always had certificate programs at BTS, and last year you tailored it particularly to PCA and we marketed it to ruling elders. And so, if you're listening to this, how can BTS serve you? Well, you've heard Ike talk quite a bit about if you're able to get a group together through your church or your presbytery, BTS wants to work with you and send you a professor. And that may be an option for you or your presbytery. But otherwise, three groups are in mind. One is, most people who listen to this are officers, but not everybody. I see on Twitter there are congregants in churches that actually listen to this podcast. So if you are looking to get a Master of Arts or Master of Divinity, if you're thinking about pastoral ministry, BTS has those programs. And again, you can do those by virtual conference. So they would be like this in a group, and you'll have interaction with the other students and with the teacher. If you are already a pastor, the Doctor of Ministry programs are phenomenal. I mean, I'm in one. And what I love about it and why I chose BTS over the many, many great options, and I considered a number of good options, is for one, BTS has, you actually have concentrations. You are in a track in your doctoral studies in pastoral leadership, church multiplication, counseling, or the one I'm in is apologetics, and it's the only apologetics D-Min I've ever seen anywhere. And so there's that. And then also for ruling elders, you can do certificate programs. And what's the beauty of this, and why I have 2 ruling elders that have taken these classes, and one of them in particular, while he's not sure he's going to get a master's degree, that was an interesting little thing for him. These are the master's level classes that you're teaching.
Real deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you take 5 classes, you can have a certificate in a number of different things. One of them is Presbyterian leadership. But those classes will apply to a master's degree in the future. And so it's the kind of thing where you could take a class here, take a class there, you're working toward a certificate, and one day you might have a master's degree. Anything to add to that?
What we've tried to do is basically say, like, look, we have a 102-hour Master of Divinity program, and we have a 62-hour Master of Arts in Biblical Counseling program, and a 62-hour Master of Arts in Public Theology. Those are kind of cores, you know.
Those are legit, man, because there's a lot of MDivs that are going to 70 credits.
Oh yeah, no, we're not doing that at all. Now we do have a 64-hour Master of Arts in Pastoral Leadership. But
that's good.
Designed for guys that are like 40 plus years old that already have 15 years of service and leadership in the church. But I would say just the simple question is, look, if you're interested in it, we have taken all those courses from within those spheres, and from them we've pulled out, all right, you put these 3 or 4 together, it's wonderful for a lay leader. You put these 4 or 5 together, it's wonderful for somebody who teaches Bible study on a regular basis. It's no skin off our teeth. We're not adding new classes. These are classes that people are taking training for ministry. So if you're a local lay person in the church and you just have a passion for an area, just contact us. The likelihood is we have some kind of certificate. People need checkpoints. They need good spots where they can say, I've completed something, and we work with you and find that good checkpoint relative to the programs that we have that have gone through our accreditation process and everything else with arts. So just contact us. It's going to be affordable. Cost is never the reason that somebody has not been able to take a class at BTS. Period. Just never is.
What I advise people is so often people I run into say, I think I may want to do a master's. I think I may want to take counseling classes. Maybe I want to be a counselor one day. And I'm like, I just think start taking a class. Take a class. And BTS is the kind of place you can take a class. Right. And your counseling program is phenomenal. I took an extra class just so I can have Dr. Irick.
Yeah.
I mean, he's nationally known, has books. He's taught in other seminaries, and it was just awesome to have him and Dr. Blackman. So, well, tell us about GA, and I'm gonna put my swag on now. I don't know if you're gonna have these at GA or not, but
I have only one left. That's all I've got. So,
okay.
We do.
You see, I'm representing. I'm wearing more BTS swag right now than you.
Well, George, we don't have.
Oh, you multiplied your animals.
Any more hats, but we had our first year that we started doing this. We had our Barker the Bear.
Barker the Bear.
And so
I gave those to my kids. Those were GA giveaways.
That's right. And then last year, of course, with my dad's passing, we had Harry the Lionheart, of course, and so this year with Dr. Hay passing away in February, we have Hay the Hound Dog.
Nice.
So, we've already got next year's, but I can't reveal that. I mean, we've already picked what we want to do, but I can't reveal it for you. But so we've got our, all you got to do is give us your email address and let us send you, some information post GA, about everything we've got going on. So it's It's going to be exciting. I'll just finish out by saying this, if people are interested. Because of the way we operate, George, and this is going to be, we're going to be doing a presentation at the GRN dinner on Wednesday night, and we've got
Are those books being?
Yeah, these books are going to be given away to attendees at the GRN dinner, and then of course it'll be for sale as well. I've already promised the GRN, since they're doing it as a giveaway at the dinner, that we won't give the book away at the booth. So sorry in advance, but it'll be for sale at the Christian Focus booth, of course, and then for sale, following General Assembly. But for people that want to come by, we can't wait to see and talk to you. We're going to have a lot of great materials, new materials on everything that we've got going on. But I'll finish out with this. Where are we, in terms of organizationally? The Lord's blessed over the last 5, 6, 7 years in terms of fundraising and support for the seminary, but we've never taken on a project like this. Our prayer is to endow the Reeder Center. And so, in an average environment, an endowment would be for a chair, and a chair would pay for a professor. And that's normally, if you have fully endowed chairs, around $4 to $5 million. Well, we've got a $5 million endowment mark for the Reeder Center. All of those things we talked about. If we have a $5 million endowment, all of it's paid for. Not only that, it would house up to 1,000 students. And listen, if you're taking the Presbyterian Leadership Certificate, that's housed in the Reeder Center. So, those are, that will grow even more opportunities. And honestly, the most important thing, George, let us stay $100 per credit hour. I mean, there's challenges all the time for us. Raise your price. I don't want to raise the price. I promised Frank Barker when I became president, Frank, I will never raise the price of BTS. $5 million could fund literally thousands of students on an annual basis, training for ministry and leading in the church. I mean, that is a drop in the bucket of what most schools have to raise, many of them annually, So our prayer is that at General Assembly, we just have great conversations about what God is doing. Lots of interest in how we can help support the work of the church, and people that are interested in saying, how do we make this thing go for the next 50, 100 years until the Lord comes and renews all things. That's our prayer.
That's awesome. Like, how can somebody who's listening to this do that if they would like to partner with you guys in that way financially? What's the best avenue?
The best way to do that is just to go to the website, bts.education, spell out education, not .edu, or else we would be Banger Theological Seminary, which is a really, really liberal one in Maine. So don't go give money to them. But bts.education, and there's a donate button, and you can pull it up. There's opportunities to give to the Reeder Center, to support the Reeder Center, to give to support the Barker Hay Scholarship Fund, and some other, our prison initiative and all that kind of good stuff. But you can go there. There will be a live website for the Reeder Center. I think it's supposed to go live the first week of June. And that'll be readercenter.org is what it'll be. So very easy to find. And that'll obviously have giving options on that website as well. And we'll have that information at GA also.
That's great, Ike. And so for listeners, there's lots of great seminary options out there. We love them all. Ike has relationships with them all, but we are just maybe BTS is a good fit for you. I know it was for me. Ike, I appreciate you, brother, and my thoughts and prayers go out to you and your sisters and your mom. And your dad made a difference in my life, and he made a difference in a lot of people's lives and a lot of churches. And so thank you.
And mine made a difference in my life. Praise the Lord.
Absolutely.
Thanks, brother.
Okay. Yep, sure.
My friend.
If you want to know the worth of a seminary, go take a look at their graduates. Our graduates are all over the world. They're planting churches, they're revitalizing churches, they're translating the Bible, they're starting discipleship movements. It's heart-shaking, life-changing, and just mind-expanding of what God is doing.
Sometimes I really do have to pinch myself that what I get to do with the ministries at BTS, the engaging with the students and the impact that God uses us to have on the lives of our students, it's a pleasure, it's an honor, and it's a joy.
Jesus is still building his church. So we need to equip the pastor teachers who equip the saints. We need to equip the elders who shepherd the church. And I am grateful that Birmingham Theological Seminary is available to be a part of the expansion of the kingdom of God in these very crucial days